Today I want to talk to you about the importance of tools for delicate and subtle craft. There are many tools that are involved in the craft of cooking. The most important one, the most symbolic one as well, is probably the knife. And I would even go as far as to say that the knife becomes an extension of your body when you are working product. If you have a good knife, you are able to respect the product. You are able to go exactly where you want to go, right? Your hand and your mind know where to go, but if your knife is not good, you can't get there. It is also, important to convey through the small details that sometimes are even, under our threshold of perception when it comes to perceiving, to appreciating a plate of food, that goes in the details of how sharp and how well the knife technique or the cutting techniques are. And in later courses, I will probably go into the details of the craft of slicing, of cutting, the different types of knives, different types of techniques, and also recommendations on how to improve knife skills. But today, I wanted to focus on the first element, which is to have a sharp knife, and also to understand the basics of the relationship that you need to establish with your own utensil. This is my first real serious knife. I got it back in 2005 as I was graduating from culinary school. So this knife is 16 years with me, and I've been keeping it since then. And this knife also represents not only the kind of rite of passage to move into a more professional stage of my life with the craft of cooking, but also it represents a tool that taught me a lot, or a tool that witnessed a lot of my personal growth. So it definitely means a lot. And if you don't have knives and you love cooking, I invite you to establish this type of relationship with the utensils that you use to express your craft. So this knife was actually about maybe 7-8 millimeters wider. I actually struggle working with this one now because I've sharpened it so much that now when I'm cutting, my fingers hit the cutting board. And that is the truth also of a utensil, and there's beauty in it as well, that it will age and it will become obsolete or it will stop working. But I still enjoy using it from time to time, and I still especially enjoy sharpening it. So that's a bit about the philosophy of cooking, and of in particular the relationship between the cook and its utensil, knife. There are many types of knives that you can choose, and many different types of styles of knives as well. Two main schools, the European school and the Japanese school. I personally started with European knives, but then after I went and understood better Japanese craft, I could never go back to the European ones. Let's say that European knives are more low maintenance, and in particular the style of sharpening is much easier, less time consuming. You will probably never get the same amount of edge and cutting power, let's say, with European knives, but they will be much more low maintenance and just easier to use in general. Japanese knives can reach a level of sharp that no other knives can, because of the traditional techniques and centuries old traditions around the work of metal in particular. This knife, my first one, is a Damascus type of metal work. It is made of steel, right, stainless steel, and I have So to show you the difference, the main difference for the material, right? This knife is stainless, right? You can see it's actually molybdenum steel, but you can see it's very bright and kind of very even surface. Here you have a Japanese knife that is made of carbon steel. You can see that there's a difference in the type of color that it has, let's say, and shine. This is because carbon steel oxidizes, right? Because of the carbon that it has. And so this one will be harder to maintain, and this one in particular got wet and did not get dry properly. So that is why it has these stains. And I'm going to show you later how to basically clean up a knife that is like this, kind of starting to oxidize. It's not too bad, but if a knife becomes oxidized on the edge, water, right, will eat it, right? So you have a very, very hard carbon steel. It is, a very potent tool, but water is its worst enemy. And food is mostly water. So that means that in the using of the knife, of any knife really, but in particular carbon steel, you always have to dry your knife between uses and try to never leave it wet with food. So that's why in Japanese kind of craft, in kitchen craft, you always have knives, and there's always a little towel or cloth that will be there for cleaning the knife between uses, right? Always, and drying it out, especially when you're going to put it away and keep it for a few days out or a few weeks or months. It is very important that it is in a dry place. As I said, there are many types of knives. And let's say that 80% of what you need to do in the kitchen you can do with one knife. That is my experience. Of course, if you're in a highly technical kitchen, or if you have to do mostly fish, and depending on the size of the fish, or if you're doing a particular type of food that requires smaller knives or harder knives, you will have kind of more knives in your cutlery set. But in general, and I would even say at home, you can do 95% of things with two knives and 80% with only one. Let's say that the basic one would be this type of knife. This is a Santoku knife. And a small one like this one, right? Or even smaller, that would do all the kind of small vegetable peeling or any type of work that you have to do in your hand, right? You better have a smaller knife. If it's on a cutting board, having a Santoku like this is probably enough. So knives also have different properties, right, depending on their shape. So for example, this one is actually made for big fish like salmon, for instance. So you can see it bends, right? It bends quite easily, which is not the case of this one, right? Very little bending. That actually may play a role, because if I want to enter a large knife, this knife into a large fish, I might do some pressure to be able to really espouse the shape of the skeleton, the bones of the fish, to really try to minimize waste when preparing a fillet of fish. And for example, another type of knife that I have here, this is more of a butcher's knife. It has a very strong and very hard tip and very fine. So this is normally a butcher's knife because you can go very deep and very precise with this knife, right? The length and the very fine angular tip will allow me to really go into small places, right? This could also be used for, many other things, but mostly this one is for butchering, for preparing large pieces of animals, or also vegetables, right? Or any type of precise craft that requires a very, very sharp tip. So this one in particular, when I sharpen it, I really focus on the tip quite a lot, because it is the part that I'm going to use most. For a knife like the Santoku, of course, the most important part will be this one, right? Because this is where the area that you're going to be using most to slice. just like this one, well, you probably want all of it to be really sharp. The knife that I use most today is actually this Sakai knife that I got in Kyoto. I wanted to, visit Japan to get the tool that I wanted to work with for decades after my first knife. And I wanted to meet the maker. For me, it was really important. And I invite you to think about this not only as an object that you need to, buy and consume, but even, try to go deeper into that understanding. I remember when the craftsman who made this knife actually wrote my name here in Japanese characters, or at least, how you would pronounce my surname, Michel, here. And it was for me a very important moment, which is why also you don't let anyone use your knife, right? It's a personal object. It is made, let's say, for me, right? Or it was intended to me, and I'm also left-handed, right? And that has a big importance. The handle here of this knife was actually designed for left-handed because it has a little line here that allows me to really take the knife more ergonomically, right? If it were a right-handed knife, it would have this little bump on this side. Also very important, especially for Japanese style of sharpening, the angles of your edge will shift depending on your knife, depending on you and how you like your knives, and depending if you're left-handed or right-handed. So imagine we zoom in the edge of the knife. Normal knives in the European style of knife always has a V shape, more or less, quite an open V shape, right? Which is why the European sharpening is often done with this round kind of metal piece, and you pass your knife kind of on each side, right? Sharpening with the same angle on both ends, right? Here and here would keep the same angle, right? You have a very V-shaped type of angle. The problem with that sharpening is that it's never as sharp, but it resists much longer. Japanese knives rarely have these symmetrical V-shape. They're either like this or like this, right? So for me as a left-handed, I actually sharpen my knife. So imagine this is a zooming in of the edge. My knife would be like this, like really the tip, and then it would be like this, right? Right, so you have a little angle here, in comparison to the sides of your knife. You have a little angle here and a bigger angle here. What does that mean? That on the external side of where I slice, my knife has an angle like this, and on this side, it has a bit of a sharper angle. Why does that matter? When you enter, let's say, a slice of carrot, or you make a julienne, something that requires a lot of precision, the food, if the angle is a bit more open, the food will fall off from your knife. You've seen many times that you cut and the things that you're slicing get stuck to the surface of your knife. Well, with this angle, things will fall. And on this side, with the sharper knife, it means that I'll have more control entering the product. It will enter straight because I'm going to be controlling it a bit towards the inside when I'm slicing. Now, if, for example, I use a right-handed sharpened knife, because it will be like this, when I slice, my knife will tend to go to the right, right? To the left, to my left, and will not be comfortable, and it might be dangerous to use a knife that is not yours. There's often a misconception that say like, oh, if you have really sharp knives, you are at risk of cutting yourself. That's not true. Actually, you have more risks of going into an accident or cutting yourself if you don't know the tool that you're using, and if the tool that you're using is not sharp enough. When you have a sharp tool, it will go exactly where you tell the tool to go. It will not go somewhere else, which is what causes accidents. If your knife is not sharp enough and you're trying to do a very fast julienne, maybe the knife will not enter and kind of rip, and this is where you cut your fingers. So always thinking that the sharpness of your thinking, the clarity of thinking, and also, let's say, the neatness with which you can work is connected to your ability and the quality of your sharpening and the quality of your utensil and your tool. So that is a fundamental aspect of knives, and a bit of a short intro to the world of knives, of choosing a knife that is yours. So in a second I will start showing you how to sharpen the knives. Here I have a Japanese stone, double-sided stone. It's not it's an investment, but it's not too expensive, but very important to know how to sharpen knives with the Japanese water stone, which is my favorite technique, and also one that I learned from a Japanese friend in kitchens, who taught me a little bit of the discipline that you must have and the technique that you must have in order to sharpen your knives well. One element that I want to add is the importance of keeping your knife sharp and how to keep your knife sharp for longer. The first thing is, of course, trying to avoid, especially if it is carbon steel, trying to avoid to have your knife in a humid element. I've seen so many friends lose their knives, and even myself ruin part of my knife because of just simply leaving it in a wet kitchen towel for a day, and then coming back the next day and it has a dent in it. Especially the sharper edge will take a big hit if you let it oxidize. That's the first thing. Second thing is, a very sharp knife should never touch, that edge should only ever touch food or a wooden board or a plastic board. That's it. Nothing else. There shouldn't be any other contact between this edge and another material apart from food and the cutting board. That is very important, because sometimes we'll say, oh no, I'll just cut this lemon here on the edge of my table. That really kind of flattens the edge, and you will also lose sharpness. Another aspect is, I think, really the basic care for a knife is, of course, never to drop it on the floor. Why? How do you, of course you can have an accident and just drop it on the floor, which is actually one of the most common accidents in kitchens, is a knife dropping on the floor, and I've personally seen it myself going into someone's foot. And you want to avoid any type of accidents. Which is also why when you are circulating in the kitchen with a knife in your hand, you will always carry it pointing down and near your body, so to not hurt anyone. But the main thing is, if you have your knives, you take responsibility of your knives fully. I never ask anybody to clean my knives. My knives, I clean them, right? And I would recommend you do the same, because you can keep control of it. The worst thing you can do also is to put it in a sink full of water. It's a very, very simple and stupid accident. Just put some knives there in a sink, and there's some soap, and someone else goes there to try and clean it, and there's very sharp knives there, and they cut their fingers. So really thinking about the knife as an extension of your body, thinking of the knife as the tool that can make your craft really speak what you want to say. And of course there's more tools in kitchens, but the knife is really the extension of your hand. So care for it as if it was an extension of your hand or part of your body, right? And this is something I really feel very closely related to, is really having a relationship of mutual respect with the knife. And in that way, really being able to sharpen your skills, literally, as you practice. like with any craft or any art, practice makes mastery. Getting better at controlling your knives, getting better at cooking, and getting better at sharpening your knives are all parts of the same ecosystems of skills that you need to perfect in order to become a great cook. And when I say great cook, I say great cook, not great chef. Chef is a position in a kitchen that you aspire to become, right? The chef is like the master of a kitchen. Cooks, we're all cooks. I'm a cook. I'm not a chef because I'm not leading a kitchen right now at the moment. So I do not deserve the title of chef de cuisine or chief of kitchen. So the humble and beautiful craft of cooking, of transforming food, of the technique of food, right, really goes with a very dear relationship with utensils and tools that you use to transform the food, but also your relationship to those utensils in terms of creativity, in terms of use, in terms of freedom of expression, really. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the stone, the position of the stone, and the position of the body while sharpening. So first things first, your stone might be like this one, quite thin, or it might be bigger, but it's incredibly important that it is very well placed on the surface so it doesn't dance or doesn't move. Here I have a base that comes with my stone that has a grip kind of here, so it will not move when I'm putting pressure on it. That is really important. If you don't have a base like this, you can take a wet cloth, put your stone on it, and that will prevent the stone from moving. So in this case, I'm going to be using my stone kind of base here. The stone has to be in water for at least 24 hours before the sharpening moment. So here it's quite wet. I'm going to have to keep on adding water as I go and eventually clean it between knives, like wash the stone between knives. So I'm going to sharpen this knife, which is my knife for kind of butchering and all kind of works that need a very sharp tip. It's a pleasure to sharpen this one because it has the two sides are actually symmetrical. Remember I told you about the angle at which you sharpen? Some knives you sharpen like this, some knives like this, depending on whether you're left or right-handed. This one has a symmetrical angle, which means that I will keep the same angle between the knife here, this angle, probably 10 degrees, 8 degrees. I'm going to keep it as I sharpen through, right? I'm going to keep it here, but I'm also going to keep the same angle sharpening the other side of the knife. One of the most important things when you sharpen a knife is that you need to understand that you don't sharpen just with your hands or with your arms even. You're sharpening with your whole body. So your body position, this is something I learned from a Japanese friend in kitchens. You have to be almost like in a running position, right? Like your left foot in front of the right one or the other way around, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But your position has to be kind of lower on your knees, right? So the hands are really at a comfortable height to move and be very precise with the strength that you apply to the stone, which doesn't have to be a lot. Like really having a good grip on your knife. So third, I'm going to talk about how you hold your knife when you are sharpening. You pretty much hold it as if you were cutting, right, with one hand. And the other hand, the one that's going to be on the blade, needs to be 2 or 3 fingers, right, putting pressure very low, very close to the edge, right? And you need to be having this pressure, not too much, not too little. And then with your other hand, you will draw the angle. And then with this, right, so I'm going to get it wet a little bit here, and I'm going to do it very slowly first. And I recommend you start slow and then you find your speed. Okay, left hand here for the left edge with the right angle. And then 3 fingers here, putting pressure on the edge, and I'm going to go slow, right? And I'm going to use the whole length of my stone. Okay? Normal speed of sharpening would be something like this. Right? But it's very important that you keep the angle constant. If you don't keep the angle constant, you will have round edges, right? You won't have straight angles. So the angle is really important in keeping it. So I'm going to start, and maybe this changes with a different knife, right? If it's longer, you will have a different process. If it's shorter, but I'm going to start by sharpening this part, then the middle part, and then the tip, right? So 3 movements, and you can even count, right? So I'm going to go like 40 times here, and then 40 times here, and then 40 times here, right? And then that will be good for one side, and then you will move to the second side. So here I'm sharpening the base, the center, and now the tip. Okay, you saw my stone is moving a little bit. I'm going to dry my table. I don't want my stone to move, because if it moves, it's a risk for you like ripping or cutting yourself, and of course you're putting pressure on a weapon, so you might cut yourself, and you need to be very, very careful with that. Okay, so I did the first side. Now, if I do like this with my knife, with my hands, I feel that the edge is a bit kind of curved, right? Because I sharpened this side, it's soft on this side, and it's kind of, I can feel it grates almost my fingers here, because my edge is like this right now, because I only sharpened this side. Now I'm going to move to this side, right? To get that edge down, and finally, right now I have it like this. I'm going to sharpen this side so it really stays like this, okay? So 2 options for sharpening the second side. You can either, so I'm left-handed here, right? I can either do this and sharpen on this side, right? Or I can take with my right hand, and it requires you being a bit ambidextrous or just some practice, to do the exact same movement that I was doing here, but with this side, right? So this is how I prefer doing it, so it's more symmetrical. And also, if you sharpen this side and then this side, I always have a problem here, right? With especially this base, it's going to be okay here, it's going to be okay here. But when I do here, my knife will hit the stone and will not let me sharpen at the angle I want, right? So this is why I've trained myself to always sharpen with the edge towards the inside. And of course, everyone develops their own technique depending on their own knives and depending on their own practice. This is a bit like yoga, the yoga of knives. You have your own practice. The important thing is that you get to the result. Okay, so now I'm going to sharpen the other side. Same angle, okay? Hold my knife quite tight. Put some more water. Your stone needs to be wet all the time. Okay, I'm going to do 20 times here, 20 times here, and 20 times here. Okay, meat part. Okay, and now the tip. See how my position here changed? I'm not holding it here because I don't have the same control as if I hold it here, right? And this is specific to this particular knife. If I had a longer knife, I would probably not do this. Okay, so now, if you look a little bit closer, here you should have a little shine on this side. See, this is where the stone, where it's brighter because this is carbon steel, you can see where I sharpened. The quality of your sharpening needs to be that this edge is almost like a perfect line, right? Here I have a little mistake, here I have a little mistake, it's okay, right? I can recuperate it, I can try to sharpen, but the idea is that this little edge here, which is maybe 1.5 millimeters, is constant over the whole length and is really regular. So I'm going to just get better on this little point here. Right, so I have a regular edge here and a regular edge here. Good, I have to see if it's consistent, right? So it needs more on this side because this one is already soft. This one is a bit more scratchy, so I'm gonna work a little bit more on this side. So bear in mind that this stone has two sides. This one is 1,000 in this technical kind of number, right? 1,000, and here I have a 4,000 stone, meaning that this one is much finer, much more fragile, but it has a finer grain, which means that it will really polish the knife and finish it and make it stronger, right? So you do most of the work with the more kind of rough side of the stone, and then you go to a more fine side. This is important for us to have two different types, so that way you can really push the edge to be as sharp as possible and as strong as possible as well. So I really recommend you get a two-sided stone. They last for less long, of course, they will get used, but they will provide a better sharpening outcome. Okay, so now I'm going to this side. It's much softer here. Okay, I can feel here on this side softer than this one. So I'm going to now even both sides. Right, you can see how the metal is kind of, being left on the stone. Okay, so now I'm going to show you, right, you have even brighter edge right here. I can tell my knife is ready to go now. So depending on how much sharpening your knife needs, you maybe spend between 8 minutes and 30 minutes per knife. And it really is a work of precision. Don't look for speed before you have the right technique. Always first get your movement right and be very careful, right? You can even sharpen at this speed if you want. It will take longer, but really it requires years of experience to be able to do it fast. And the faster you go, often the more you lose in quality and precision. So now that my knife is ready, immediately I need to dry it really well and just put it away, okay? Last thing I want to give you is I highly recommend, so you saw that my knife was maybe using this part of the stone, right? If you do this a lot, right, so you might want to turn it around so this edge is used, but also this side. But the more you will use your stone, the more it will become curved, and you will lose precision to make proper kind of angular sharpening. So it's very important to have a little stone like this. It's actually a stone to sharpen the stone, right? So here, after every time I'm done, I'm going to make sure that my stone remains even, especially by going to the two extremities of the stone to make sure that my stone doesn't become round. or concave, right? I'm gonna do this with this side, and before putting your stone to dry, or you can leave it in water, but ideally if you're not using it for a few days, just put it away. But it's very important that you sharpen your stone as well, right? You can see there it's quite flat. There's two ways to know that your knife is sharp. The first one is to try with your nail. If you feel it enters the nail, it's really sharp, right? Of course you can see with your fingers like this, but the ultimate test is the razor test. Seeing that, it's as sharp as a razor. Beautiful. Thank you for watching. Come back.